Hey golfers, I'm Drew Mahowald with Second Swing Golf, and welcome back to the Second Swing YouTube channel. We have another live at lunch once again here. Of course, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Central Time. We'll be live on our YouTube channel going through the latest in equipment and fitting and perhaps some more. And today we've got two special guests with us. We have two master fitters that know a lot about golf equipment and a lot about club fitting. We have Tyler Fitzel, who has been with us for the last several live at lunches. And we have Kevin Kraft, who is in town here in the Twin Cities from the Columbia, Maryland store. Gentlemen, how are we doing? I know Kevin's trying to stay warm. Tyler,
yes.
Kevin, how you guys doing?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
You know, indoors.
Yeah, right.
Don't want to be outdoors right now.
Yeah. Even the walk in from the parking lot was a chilly one with the wind right now.
Miserable.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's brutal. So we're here because we have some clubs to talk about, some brand new golf clubs to talk about. And, you know, I guess my idea, to be transparent to the viewers, my idea was to go by handicap here, and hence what you're going to see on the title and in the notes in the description was go by handicap. Mm-hmm. And then Tyler kind of thought we should clarify that a little bit. So we're still going to go through by handicap, but we're going to kind of clarify what that means to start here. So Tyler, I'm going to defer to you here. We're going to start with high handicap golfers. I'm going to put that in air quotes.
Right.
But maybe dial in exactly what that means, and then we'll talk about drivers.
Yeah, totally. So, like, when you talk about a high handicap club, what it does is it kind of meets certain criteria to it. Number one, we talk about ball speed. Ball speed tends to be like the major factor to a lot of these things. When we start talking about handicap, when I miss, do I still get the distance? When I miss, does it go a little bit straighter? When I miss. Mm-hmm. When we start talking about that high handicap towards let's call it a mid handicap for that matter, right? In a mid handicap, we still miss, but our misses might be a bit more concentrated to one thing versus another. So we start talking about a low handicap, and again, we might not miss as much, but we have different needs for the type of club that we want. I think about like a low handicap, generally a much thinner club. It's got more loft on it. We think about kind of workability and how am I gonna hit the shot? Can I move this shot? You start talking about kind of that mid, and this is still more about distance and adding a little bit more forgiveness. And then you get into like a higher handicap. I can use family members, even like I think about my dad, right? Has a lot of misses, but can I make the misses a lot better? So gaining in launch, I get a bigger club. I allow him to kind of hit it on the toe, the heel, high, low. I also get a nice wide sole that he doesn't just, chunk and dig in. And so, but I look at that. Yes, he's a high handicap. There's handicap, and then there's how do you define that handicap? And for me, is that when a player comes in, I think of it as like, are you looking for workability and feedback? Are you looking just for more distance with what you've got or your game? Are you really looking to kind of help with these shots that are all over the place?
Yeah, so it's funny because even before we went live, we got a comment in the chat from the YouTube name is Captain America. I don't know if it's actually Captain America or not. But
it'd be kind of cool.
That'd be cool.
Said handicap has very little to do with club selection. A guy plagued with a hard left miss or hard left miss hits does not need offset. And you guys, it's funny. You guys were talking about that exact thing prior to going live. So had to address that. So, all right, let's dive into high handicap golfers, or maybe golfers that want performance on miss hits. So we're talking about drivers here.
Okay.
I'll start with you, Kevin, since we kind of heard Tyler's perspective on things already. Yeah. But if there's a driver out there that's in the fitting bays right now, maybe new for 2025, that's going to be really good for miss hits, what is the first model that comes to mind?
I mean, anytime you're talking about forgiveness, almost the first thing that comes to mind is going to be Ping. Mm-hmm. Ping just makes really good forgiving golf clubs. That said, we've got a couple 10K models out this year, QI 35 Max and Dark Speed Adapt Max K. Very good, very forgiving drivers. Everybody's getting better at it too. I mean, the ability to make a driver long, forgiving, and playable is getting better and better. Yeah. If anything's changing through these generation over generation, it's really making golf club more stable and more playable while continuing to make them longer. I mean, your standard issue models have not necessarily always been low spin. they pretty much now are.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to go into a low spin model and give up some of that forgiveness. You can stay in a standard model or a max model and still get great performance.
Let's talk about Callaway. Now, it's not necessarily that I'm saying, oh, Callaway is my first choice with this, because I agree with you. Ping. Callaway's AI technology is about your misses.
We saw it today.
Yeah.
In doing the videos that we recorded today, the Elite was in the standard model was incredible on forgiveness.
Yeah.
That 10x face did exactly what they asked it.
Yeah.
Or told us that it would do.
They're literally, that is the definition of it. And whenever you start talking about technology, it kind of goes back into the same sort of things we were just mentioning about, like handicap styles. With the driver, do I need workability?
Mm-hmm.
Do I just need a little bit more distance, but I've already kind of got my swing figured out? I might miss once in a while. Or like, do I really miss altogether? And I just need to kind of get as much distance and direction as I can with it. Yeah.
I think it would be helpful, honestly, for you and me, the first thing we have to ask somebody is if they come in and their scores are 100 plus, what makes you 100 plus?
Yep.
Right? Do you have trouble off the tee?
Yep.
Are you great off the tee, pretty good into the greens, and then if you miss the greens, you are a nightmare, or you can't kick it in from 3 feet? I mean, there's a million different ways to shoot high numbers in golf. Mm-hmm. So which way are you? What's the best part of your game? What's the worst part of your game? What are we working on?
And to add to your point too, because when you talk about kind of that high handicap style, as we're talking about drivers, I love the fact that you said there's a lot of this 10K, right? And that is, we've moved the weight as far back down as possible to reduce any twisting, to try to get this ball to go as straight as we can with as much distance as we can.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes back towards it's the miss.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go back to the comment you made earlier too about, I think this may be him too, hey, everything's left. Regardless of handicap, I'm also looking at that and saying, well, which of these models is going to help me help the customer get into that? That if I'm a right miss, I have certain technologies that'll help with right misses, left misses. Do I have too much launch, too little, things like that?
Yeah.
It's like really, and that's why every company's got at least 4 models, if not 5 models of drivers.
Yeah.
To get us towards, regardless of handicap. But I certainly think every company's got you covered right now with some great technology for that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the forgiveness factor with it. Every company delivers there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Ping with G440.
Yep.
Now Callaway Elite, we saw today in our testing, which will, by the way, be on the YouTube channel soon. The Elite was awesome. Now DS Adapt has a 10K model.
Phenomenal.
QI35 is awesome.
Yep.
So, I mean, you could go down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But I think each manufacturer has an option for the player that needs that forgiveness. Each manufacturer has the 10K option or something close to 10K. So if you're the player looking for the miss hit, lean towards those models, I think. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at with those types of golfers.
And don't you love the guy that comes in with a one-way miss?
Yes. It always goes straight left. All right, well, let's just not get it, down.
Yeah. I mean, the fitting is defined in the first moment, and then it's all about making that not happen.
Driver fitting this morning. Gentleman's got pretty good game to that. We call it mid-handicap. Hits the ball off the tee pretty straight, coming off really low. Not really any ball speed, not any distance. Probably a 6 or 7 year old driver. Doesn't matter the brand because I don't want to downplay any brand. Yeah. We ended up in another driver. Took the launch up, took the spin down, current technology. We added 20 yards on carry in total and straighter. And after we had tried multiple, 4 companies, put this thing in his hand, hits 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot, 4 shot, best drives, consistency. He goes, do I need to hit this anymore? I said, no, we're done. That was, he even said it too. It's this is amazing. And yeah, that's what we're really looking for regardless.
And that's this, we talked about this actually yesterday where there's this myth out there for a lot of people that if I have a higher handicap, I actually, why would I get fit? Because I'm not good enough to get fit. And you're talking about actually now it's probably the opposite, where a player sees more gains from a fitting if they are maybe a higher handicap to that, or
Absolutely.
or struggling with contact. So yeah, we talked about the drivers. I also wanted to give the opportunity to talk about some fairway woods and maybe get into the irons as well. Talk about specific models, because fairway woods are also built differently for players that really need lift off the ground. So Kevin, I'll start with you. A fairway wood, if there's a specific model. Otherwise, maybe we can talk about kind of the characteristics of these fairway woods. But of maybe a player that's looking for help on miss hits, or a player that needs a little bit more performance on the fairway woods, is there a model that you're going to go to off the top?
I mean, from what I'm seeing right now, I'm really high on the Elite. I think it's just it's a rocket ship. It looks good. When you put it down, the size of it, the shape of it, the amount of face that you see, it just all leads into, I'm going to hit a good shot with this. Yeah. I think they've done a great job with that one. Ping's fairway woods are always really good as well. Mm-hmm. I could wax poetic probably about each model if I needed to, if you gave me the time. But right off the top of my head, probably, definitely the Elite, and then G440. Love the new 4-wood option there too.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I would add to that, TaylorMade, because one of the things TaylorMade did this year is, for the first time in their, call it more standard lineup, for the tour lineup, they always used to have adjustable drivers where you could move the shaft.
Yeah.
And you can move the weight. Well, they went to that adjustability in terms of their loft sleeve on the fairways now. So you've got three woods and 5 woods.
Yeah.
They have 7 woods in that adjustable too.
I don't know. I don't know if the 7 wood is.
Yeah,
I know the 3 and the 5.
I know what the 3 and the 5.
Yeah.
They set up really well to the ball.
They do.
We can adjust that, and so TaylorMades have always been really, really good fairway woods.
Yeah.
In that line. So I certainly think now with adjustability, which the Callaway Elite is, which the Ping is, and now the TaylorMade is, that really puts them all in that category. Love them.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. It is a bit of a game changer there, having the standard model and the max model be able to be adjustable. Puts them in a completely different dimension, for sure. Yeah.
I want to transition to irons, because we actually have a good question here on that note, to get into irons and talking about not just high handicap, but also about the player's tendencies. And so any irons that would help with an out-to-in swing path is the question here. Is there anything that comes to mind there? Because I think there could be some players that are lower handicap that this would apply to, but the example here he adds is Adele, where you can move weight around. So is there something that specifically comes to mind for someone with an out to in swing path?
You can start with that one, Kevin. Or unless you want me to start with that one.
So
this is a player that cuts across.
Yeah. I suppose it depends a little bit on whether that's, somebody that comes. I've had players in that come considerably out to in. I had a player last week or 2 weeks ago, 12 degrees out to in, right? But he was great with his hands, and he squared up the face fantastic. And he had a big curve to it, but he hit it in the middle almost all the time. And, his life would get easier if it didn't come quite so much from the outside, but he hit it really good, and there was no issue there. So I think about, offset, trying to help with that. I instantly go to potentially lie angle to go with that, and that can be done on anything. I don't think we have anything that's got movable weights right now in an iron that we can change.
No, we have
PXG does.
We have changeable weights.
Yes.
So you can talk about, like with Ping. Ping has the ability to put more weight inside the hosel when they put it together, or on the toe. I would look at it like this. The answer to the question is yes, but to get to that answer, there's so much variety to it.
Yeah.
And my kind of go-to is this in this conversation is the game of golf is a club. You swing, hit a ball. And there are those 3 entities. Well, number one, yes, you might have an outside to in pathward, but there's a lot of variables that go with it. Okay, why is that happening? Is it because of balance or transition? Do you have any do you like physical limitations, like, oh, I have a bad hip, so I can't really turn, and so the movements. It's always a conversation that we're going to have to get into. So the easy answer is, well, yes, there is something. The harder to that is, what do you do with it? Because what you do with the club also matters to the club that we've got. And then when you got that club, you got your swing, and you hit that ball, then the result comes what's happening to the ball.
The other question then becomes, is this something that we really want to do? With drivers, fairway woods, and hybrids, it's easy. We can throw it into max correction for now, and then if things get corrected on the player's side, then we just adjust the golf clubs.
Right, with the hosel.
It's not the same with irons, right? So, do we want to go full correction to accommodate something where if the individual is going to take lessons, is going to work on their game? I consider myself very much an enhancement style fitter, where I don't go super correctional unless I am absolutely certain that we need to, and or it's going to be good for the player down the line, right? I don't want to do something that's good in the moment but hurts their abilities to develop in their game. So,
and to be more specific on that, let's talk about the technology. When you start talking about movable weights on an iron, there's not enough movable weight to make a gear effect difference that's, I would say, life-changing.
Yeah.
You can do that in a driver, and even to the driver, the ones that have weight up front, when you move it, that's closer to the ball, the impact, that's going to make a larger difference in it. But in an iron, the other piece of that is the swing factor to this. And I would agree with you. If you do something and you do it well, if you do it consistently, I want to work with what you're doing on that. And so if you want to change that, we're also working on how can we change that with the equipment too.
Yeah.
Things that come to mind with that is, all right, what if I got a lot heavier so it's harder to bring it over the top? I'm just saying, as I'm not saying this is the perfect answer, but that's one of the things that sometimes we do is, what if I got a lot heavivier? It's going to be harder to move it over there. These are the types of things that we talk about.
Absolutely.
It's fair. Yeah, it's a fair. I mean, I'm sure it happens in the fitting bay all the time.
It does. Yeah. And so sometimes it's conventional versus unconventional.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes, and I get this, I'm sure you do too. My gosh, I never would have thought of it. I mean, it happened, as we were talking earlier, just was like, you got a gentleman that comes in, he gets fitted, and he's just like, never would have thought of this, wasn't even a concept, had no idea. But guess what? Our results were awesome.
Yeah.
They're really awesome.
That's what you guys are doing.
That's the great thing about it is we've been around, right? We've seen some stuff. Yeah. So we're willing to throw things, at the wall.
Yeah.
And with at least some expectation that they might stick. And when they do, it's awesome for everybody.
So on this note, then we talked quickly on irons.
Yeah.
A model so far this year that you guys like to provide just forgiveness, like in terms of if you wanted to give somebody ample playability and forgiveness in an iron, you're going to fit them now. Maybe they're playing something that's old and kind of maybe the wrong style for them. There's something that comes to mind right away.
So I mean, I'll dive in with the new Elite again. I'm pretty high on Callaway this year. The
Sounds
fact
like it,
that the shape, the look, they've finally gotten rid of in their game improvement clubs. They've gotten rid of that thick top line over the last couple generations. The new iron, very chromed out, looks fantastic, but it spins.
Yeah.
We get great ball speeds with it, and it spins. We're creating better trajectory with it. It's a huge step forward from what we've had the last couple generations.
Yeah.
Just seeing that ball spin it just puts a smile on my face because I haven't been able to create that last little while.
Right.
So anything for me now that gets up in the air and spins a lot, I'm all about it.
Yeah. And the opposite side of that too is if someone comes in and they've got too much launch and too much spin, there's some great models as well.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about, like, right now, I think a great is the Mizuno Hot Metal, the JPX Hot Metal
fantastic
lineup.
Iron.
Yeah, because, one, they have lower loft, and they don't tend to spin as much. And so, to your point, it's the opposite of we talk about both customers. One that
Yeah.
comes in with not enough launch and spin, we got something for that. You come in with too much launch and spin, well, we got something for that. And the other one I would throw in, especially with the Mizuno, the Callaway's awesome, is the Srixon lineup.
Oh yeah.
They have several models, and with the ball speed and the forgiveness aspect, it's really, really super good.
Yeah.
I call it the iron that you don't know you need.
Yeah, right.
There's so many people that just don't consider
Yep.
Srixon in the mix, and then I throw it in almost all the time because it's so good. And then, oh well, okay. I had a guy that I put him into the ZXi 4s, and he's like, "What do I need to know about Srixon? Like, I don't know anything about this." And I was like, "You're okay. It's a phenomenal golf club. Ask anybody in here, and then look up their presence." And
yeah. The rise of Srixon irons in the last few years has been, has been
Hideki's
noted
won
here.
with him this year, and Sepp Straka won with him this year.
He's been playing well.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah. I agree.
There's a couple of questions I wanted to get to from the chat here. We had a question about what are your guys' opinions on same length irons for beginners? I know it's an out there concept to some degree.
Well,
someone's asking for a quick take on that.
I've played one length. Have you?
No.
Okay.
Now,
so you can go.
My intonation was bad there. Okay, look, I know.
Just stern no.
No, it's look. I have some ideas on this, right? And you can either back me up or you can yell at me. I don't care which. If the idea is to make golf easier and you have the same setup and everything, then a 4-iron, a 5-iron, and a 6-iron that are at 7-iron length is going to be easier to hit. But by that same token, you cannot say that about your 8-iron, your 9-iron, and your wedges. So I've done multiple one length sets. If the individual is open to it, I will do 4, 5, 6, 7 in one length, and then conventional in 8, 9 in wedges, because it's not like we're going to go from middle of the stance all the way back to your right foot as you're going to wedges. It's going to be a small difference in the ball placement. Yeah. So let's make it. If we're going to try to make it easier, let's make it easier.
Yes.
Let's go shorter in the long irons. There's probably going to be some, some follow up to make sure we're getting the gapping right. Maybe not do a 4-iron, maybe do a 4 hybrid to make sure that we get that split, because we want to make sure we've got enough height and enough ball speed to be able to create the gaps. But let's make short game easier by going conventional.
Yeah. A long time ago, and I mean a long time ago, Tommy Armour had it. Was it called the Equalizer? I think the irons are called the Equalizer. And what it was, and I'm talking like 1980s, they had a set that was one length. And we saw, obviously, the Bryson DeChambeau kind of recreate this one-length idea to it. We have to be very careful because he's very specific in what he does, how he does, and how it works for him.
Yeah.
But we've had, over the growth, say, maybe, was it about 5 or 6 years now, kind of since that reemergence of the one-length idea. I completely agree. One length might be for a couple clubs. It might be for the whole set. But the idea is that we just try to maximize what the clubs are doing for you. And when you are a beginner, the first thing that I'm looking for is some consistency. And if you have a club that's generally about the same length, now, even as a beginner, if you're getting into this game and you want to try something like this, it's almost like I'm going to do every other. I'm going to grab a 5, a 7, a 9, and maybe a gap wedge. And I'm going to see whether this set kind of plays with that. When we start talking about, I had kind of the opposite effect when a gentleman came in a couple days ago and we were going to fit for it. He said, I tried my buddy's one length, like longer irons. He has variable, we call it variable length as he comes down, but from the 7, it was 7, 6, 5, and 4. And they were, his friend had made them, just kind of cut them off and did some tweaking to it. When the first one length sets were coming out from Cobra way back when, and they're really the only company that has, I'd say more on the mass market. There are other companies, like Adele has done that too, and we see there's a company, what's it called, One, where they just made one length. Cobra had to evolve, They had to evolve the lie angles. They had to evolve the loft. They had to evolve the mass, where the they had to evolve the shaft, how heavy. It was very complex, and they have continued to redefine that. But I go back to this, and the gentleman comes in. He had a set that I actually fitted for him many years ago, back when he was a different golfer, different club speed, different weight. Like, he worked on his game. So he comes in about 4 years later. We do the fitting. And we'd find with the way that he's moving the club, just getting balanced clubs at their standard length was way better. But it had to do with the fact of where he was, not where he thought he was.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation. And I'm like, hey, the numbers were so much better. And we grabbed the 5-iron, hit the 5-iron, and it's like, all right, this thing is so good. So it's really the conversation to it. And I would say that everything's on the table. And what we try to do is create consistency. And if that means we go to one-length clubs or we try that, that's okay with me. I'm all for one-length clubs, but also keep in the back of your mind, we want to make sure that it's like, that's not a blanket statement. Oh yeah, every new golfer should just grab one-length clubs. But that's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always, I know in past talking with both you guys and other fitters, whether on content or elsewhere, the most common answer I get from many of my questions to you guys is it's player dependent, or it depends on the player.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, but there might be some generalities that work for a large percentage of the players. But so we had to get that note in there.
It's going to be proven is like, you do end up with a little bit shorter and the longer irons. You can get a little bit better contact, and contact is everything.
Yeah.
And so if you can create that consistency, but it's very difficult when I take a pitching wedge and then throw 1.5 inches on it and go, oh my gosh, this is way down there.
I mean, I'm pretty comfortable hitting a 5-iron.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I still carry a 5-iron. I haven't carried a 4-iron in probably 15 years now.
Yeah.
That's the cutoff point where my ball striking is, it gets, inconsistent enough that I need a little more help. So I'm subsequently a hybrid guy.
Set makeup, set selection, and club choices are primary things in our fitting.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what we want to try to define
exactly.
for them. Yeah, absolutely.
So we got a bunch of kind of fun comments here in the chat. I know I wanted to talk about some maybe quote unquote mid-handicap or players distance clubs, but before we dive into those too far, I got to go back in here and see what we got for some questions. Someone said this is made by ZB as the account name. 10 handicap, 7-iron fitting shows I hit multiple 20-25 iron sets to a max apex of 60 to 70 feet with about 5 to 5,500 spin. Am I looking for different hardware or a swing change to get higher flight and more spin?
Club head speed.
Yeah.
That's kind of the question there, because height can very much be club head speed dependent.
Yep.
And so if he's swinging 70, 73 miles an hour,
Yep.
We may not be able to get a whole lot more than that. Could be angle of attack, could be hitting down on it, fairly hard. He's got good spin rate, really for
a 7-iron.
Yeah, these days. So unfortunately the picture's a little bit incomplete.
Yeah.
But
could there be a scenario where someone is just hitting the ball low enough where like they compress it so like they hit down on it so much?
Oh yeah, attacking
100%.
Okay.
Yeah,
driving
absolutely.
it down.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if I've got enough information basically to know that my first question is, what's the loft of the club?
Yeah.
Because if it's not launching but you've got spin, if you're hitting it pretty solid and everything kind of does the same thing, there's the idea between, and that's another great question. I love it. There's a big difference between, hey, I'm getting about 65 peak height on my irons.
He did note his club head speed is 82 miles an hour.
82.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that. Right. So he's got the club head speed to be able to get to 90.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm loft.
Yeah.
What's the loft? And it's also, when we talk about loft, there's the loft of the club. Absolutely. There's the loft that you create with the club.
The dynamic loft.
Yes.
Correct. Impact.
Yes.
Correct.
And that's one we see all the time is And our conversation is like
He says currently 32 degrees is the loft of the irons that he was hitting. So
Okay, so he's
is a
player distance
these
type.
days kind of a weaker loft, but you could still go weaker. I mean, there's no you could go to 34. There's models out there.
We were geeking out a little bit before we were starting here, and literally talking about these issues with irons and shafts and launch angles and spin, because I want his opinion. I want your opinion. I can learn. Well, we always do this. It's just like, I would automatically look at 34-degree type clubs.
Yes.
Because the spin isn't necessarily an issue.
Right.
But if that ball with that spin stays in the air longer, if it gets up and stays in the air longer, you're not necessarily going to see more total.
Yeah.
But you're going to definitely see a carry distance difference.
Yeah. So we could look at, the head model and see what's going on in terms of, all right, so we know 32 degrees. So that's a standard thing. Is it 32 degrees with I've got a Cobra King Tour head that's not really designed to be fast. Maybe we can get a faster head and weaken the loft so that we can, get the launch up but a faster face to keep the distance. Because obviously going 2 degrees weaker to try to create more height is potentially going to lose us a little bit of distance. And also, it might not. It might not. It might. The higher the ball gets, the longer it can stay in the air.
Yep.
But it could be one of those situations where we can maneuver a bunch of things.
And the
around.
first thing you said too was attack angle. So when I look at that, I'm thinking to myself, are we de-lofting the club? So a 32 isn't a 32. But generally speaking, I say generally, most of the time we de-loft the club somewhere between around 5 to maybe 8 degrees. So let's say, for instance, our attack angle is kind of steep as we get into the ball, and that's why it's launching a little bit lower. Well, if we have a head model that we really like and we add 2 degrees, we've added more bounce. We may actually you like the way it looks. It's got our ball speed. By adding loft, it may actually perform better in the turf. So there's a lot of things that we don't have to even change out of the heads that you were trying. We just might need to do it with more loft.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. That sounds like a pretty good, at least starting point to maybe dial in his.
Yeah, the other one I would say is,
there.
I think when I talk about it, you got a club, a swing, and a ball. I think the ball is another piece of this too. So there are golf balls that spin more. There are golf balls that launch higher. And I don't want to get into the ball thing totally without going down a rabbit hole. But maybe it's the golf ball unless there's other parts of your games that we need to take spin away. So it becomes a conversation.
I mean, if he's in an AVX...
let's
try a Pro V1X.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm switching from Pro V1 to Pro V1X this year.
So good.
Just to get finally soft enough for me to be able to deal with it. But I want that height and spin.
They got more. I'm sorry. The new Pro V1X has more ball speed, more launch, more spin. They're softer. It is so complete. Yeah. That's why I didn't want to get into it. But anyway, go ahead.
That's exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah, here we are.
That's why Kevin is making the switch. So, I mean,
I hope that helps.
Yeah, he did say brilliant. Thank you guys for answering that. So that's
Anytime.
really cool. We did get one. I'm going to just quick refer to Raymond added in there. He must have joined after we talked about drivers. He said he shoots in the mid to high 80s, but has trouble off the tee, but would be a good forgiving driver. And so I know we kind of talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah.
I know Kevin really likes Callaway Elite.
Yep.
We talked about all the 10K options that are out there.
Yep.
DS Adapt has a 10K in the series. We talked about QI35 and, of course, Ping as well. And so just wanted to make sure, Raymond, if you haven't, you can also scrub back to the beginning and see the thoughts.
You can.
Basically answered that exact question.
I would add this. What's your pattern?
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe it isn't one of those drivers, but it's your pattern. What's your pattern?
Yeah.
And once you know that, then I agree. Go back, kind of listen to us a little bit because we kind of described a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And good question.
We spent a lot of time talking about, high handicap or forgiving golf clubs. I wanted to move slightly into, at least in the irons, talk about a player's distance iron. So now there hasn't been a ton of new options in this particular category this year yet. There's been some, obviously we talk JPX 925 Forged is one that is kind of in that player's distance.
Very.
But is there an iron, and maybe this could be from last year or years before, what's something in the fitting bay that if you were someone that's like you're fitting them and it's a player's distance iron, I guess what's your go-to in that space?
I mean, we can go to the one that kind of kicked the whole thing off, P790.
Yeah.
You know, that one was the one that just shot to massive popularity and kind of spurned this whole thing, you know.
It really did.
But 2025 models, we don't have the new 790 yet. There's one coming. I can't imagine it's going to be particularly different from the last generation. You're not going to mess with a club that's that good too much. But
and to speak to that, the secondary option is the P770.
Yeah, very
because
good.
the P770 is a smaller version of that, but also has loft.
Yes.
So again, we're talking about high spin player, maybe low spin player. If we need something out of it, those are two really good options.
ZXi5.
Yep.
Is definitely where I go there. I've had a lot of success with the i530. It's a little bit larger head.
Yes.
So very forgiving. So that guy that's maybe on the fence, should I go that way? Should I not go that way?
Yeah.
Put that in his hands, and oh man, great ball speeds. We've now got the ability to to test both power spec and retro spec.
Yeah.
It's so good. So
And explain the retro spec, power spec to people that may
okay,
not
so
know.
power spec is essentially taking it into a stronger loft setting, about 1.5 degrees.
Yep.
And then the retro spec is actually scaling it back to more old school lofts.
Yeah.
So that that guy that we need height, we need spin.
That guy that was
need
just
launch.
was asking that question.
That's a way we can.
Yeah, that
that's
maybe
a
was
way we
the
can
very
go.
brief way to answer that would have been
Yeah.
retrospect
Yeah,
for you.
exactly.
And that's a
So-
ping thing for they've been kind of
Correct.
naming their
But every
order
company will do
order
it.
a set with
Yeah.
power spec or retro
Yeah.
spec,
Yeah, we
but
can-
there are options with other
Any
brands
club's
as well.
adjustable. We can tune anything.
Exactly. And I would say that new JPX 925 forged is a low spin option, but really solid feel, great ball speed numbers, very forgiving iron, nice, neat tri-sole. It's not jumbo, but from a power perspective, it definitely has the ball speed aspect.
Yes.
We also talk a little bit about like that Hot Metal Pro by Mizuno. Now, again, that really has a lot, like it's very less lofted. Doesn't have a lot of loft compared to some of the more traditional styles. And so again, launch and spin become issues with it. And it just goes to the if, well, hey, I launch it and spin it too much. Then we get an option there. If I don't spin it enough, okay, well then we try some options there.
And I consider that one almost in its own category where it's between
player
distance and game improvement.
Yeah.
Where we also have that grouping between player distance and player.
Yeah.
Your tour. Cobra Tour, the T150, P770. That's sort of a different. We got all these.
No.
We talk about this one and this one and this one, but then we've got this one A and then this one over here.
Well, and that's what we're talking about is like kind of by handicap is you might be in a different category to this, but maybe we get a chance if we have time to talk a little bit about the workability, right? The kind of that pro low handicap style.
Yeah.
But I think there are so many great options. It just every company's got something in that player distance. It's got something more pro and low. Someone's got some more max forgiveness, and there's one of the things I look at a little bit more as you get into this player distance is that most of them have given us more ball speed. They've given us something that's maybe a slimmer look, and I really like this category. If you could be on either side of this category depending on what we want to look for, and the sole of the clubs don't get jumbo.
Yep.
They're not huge. And so sometimes we have to look at, I've had several people that have higher handicaps and need some max forgiveness, but they might pick the club. They don't have a ton of turf interaction. So I don't really need something that's got a giant sole, because that's just going to bounce off the turf and kind of create some bladed shots or chunk shots.
Yep.
I put them in something real slim that still has the ball speed, and off it goes.
Right,
Yeah.
and this is the category for that.
It
Kind of
is.
the player, and it's funny that you mentioned the categories. It wasn't long ago when we had game improvement and we had players, and then over the last 10, 15 years, we've had all these different types of irons sort of fill in the middle of the spectrum there, which has been fascinating, and I know it's a help for you guys in the Bay. Because now high handicap, mid handicap, low handicap, whatever your handicap is, or whatever your skill level with irons, there's.
I would go back to, I think one of the players' distance club that's also more considered forgiveness is the new Elite by Callaway.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have the ability to actually add a little bit of loft, but it's not a super jumbo package. We have, with Callaway, you've got the Max Fast, so it's a little bit lighter. You've got the Elite X, which is a little bit bigger. You've got just the standard Elite. We have an Elite High Launch. So they really have encompassed it. And if you look up and down, Titleist is still making phenomenal products, but they kind of go from that. They have clubs in kind of every category we're talking about. Every company does. Ping's got a bunch.
Yep.
Every company's got that. So that is a super popular, and dare I say, probably the most in terms of a category is that we sell and or is purchased from us is kind of in the player distance category when it comes to irons.
So many options.
Yeah, there are.
I mean, there's no way to hit them all in a fitting.
No.
Right? There's no chance at all, because you'd be trying T200, T150, Cobra King, Forge Tech X, King Tour, and just going down the line and going down the line.
Two or three options.
They do.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And but we haven't talked setup. We don't talk shaft yet. Our first thing in our fitting is like, all right, let's find the head that we think is going to look good, perform well. It's kind of suits our style, and then we start to dive into some of the other parts of the fitting. And the shaft is definitely a part of it. But when I look at that category as well, for the most part, the great part is you can take the name off the back and you won't know which one you're hitting, and they all look almost identical. They all feel very similar, but there are some differences. Some companies have different weight. Some have maybe a different shape. But if you really go into it, that's why we typically only do about 3 or 4 different clubs as choices.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times you've seen the same thing. Is okay, we can get 4 clubs. They do the exact same thing. Yeah. They're all better than everything that we walked in with. Yeah. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to pick one of them. Because
that's a look and feel discussion with the player.
Yeah.
What I love is that you get it down to 2, right? And they're standing there and they're looking at these against each other. I said, hey, look, if you can't decide, I'm just going to have to sell you both sets. And at that point, everybody goes, okay, I got to make a decision, right? Because you don't want to. I mean, maybe you do want to buy 2 sets. I have never had anybody do it yet. I've had people buy 2 of the same for their place, at the beach. Versus, But at some point, it's probably going to happen where the decision just cannot be made, and they're just going to buy both sets.
That's a 30-day play guarantee, right? In theory, as long as you're going to spend that credit in the future.
Well, you make a great point. We do have it, and one of the things that I get to that as a point when we are trying to make a decision is sometimes you get these 2 identical products. It's like, all right, if it doesn't work out with one, we kind of have the other plan here. Mm-hmm. But when we have a clear winner and it's kind of this decision between something that might be a little bit here and a little bit here, well, it actually becomes easier. Okay, we're going to go with the number 1 option, right? You don't need the number 2 option. And if it does get out there and it's not working quite well, we're going to go to the number 2 option.
Right, which is, I imagine that's most.
It's if we've tested everything out there and we've gotten to the number 1 option and that's not working, it might just be we have to talk about shafts again, or we have to talk about the club head again, or maybe we talk about a different direction. So
this has been awesome, and as a lot of viewers have joined here, I kind of want to just quickly remind you, if you're subscribed to the channel, you can jump in the chat, ask a question. We're kind of discussing. We're going into some deep diving and fitting as well, but we're talking about some of the best products of this year, kind of talking about the category that they're for and the golfers that they're for. And so we've talked about high handicap, or maybe players looking for forgiveness. We just talked a little bit about maybe players' distance irons and what are some really good ones in that category. And now we're going to kind of shift into maybe the workable clubs, or players that seeking control over the golf ball, whether it be driver or irons. Typically, this tends to be lower handicap, but let's kind of dive in. Well, we've been talking about irons, and I think that we're doing well with the iron discussion. I kind of like where it's going, so let's stick with irons. Players' irons column that you guys like a lot this year in the fitting bays right now. Is there you got a cup model or 2 that comes to mind?
All of them.
Kevin says all of them. Okay.
Thanks for narrowing it down.
I'm going to make you pick one or 2 just to name.
Well, again, it kind of depends on what the individual is looking for, because I'm playing Cobra King Tours They're a little stronger lofted than a lot of the players' clubs. Mizuno Pro 243.
Yeah.
Phenomenal golf club. Strixon ZXI 7. Phenomenal golf club.
Yep.
The new S3 from Mizuno. Just glorious. I mean, it's
Are you just going to name all of them now?
Yeah,
I told you to pick one, and now you're just going to say all of them?
Yeah, I'm just going to name them all because they're all awesome. It's another one of those categories where you can't go wrong. You just got to find what you like.
Yeah.
And then we'll maximize them for you, right?
It is. What gets muddled down is the marketing. And that's kind of why we're here, is to kind of talk about some of the choices that we're seeing. It's more like real world experience or, in the fitting bay. One of the things that we see a lot, I get a lot, and I'm sure you do too, is, well, I saw on TV or I was reading and, someone will go to the website and that information is very useful, but it is also what the company wants you to know about their club. It's what the company is trying to sell you on. And that's one of the reasons why you have to come in and try them, because there's so many great options to that. And we can, I like to call it flavor testing. Just kind of like this, just, all right, you're interested in 4 of these clubs. Well, let's put the same exact shaft in. Let's hit 3 shots with each just to kind of knock off. I don't like the way that looks. I don't like the way that feels. I don't like the way that sounds. Right? We can start to knock some of those off. But you're right. We could go 10 deep and still not get to a conclusion on some things.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about marketing is that what we see the guys on the PGA Tour playing is stuff that we could get. Mm-hmm. But the guys that play a certain brand or are sponsored by someone, they're really just kind of getting you to go look at that brand. And now once you're at that brand, you're kind of at the whim of the brand. And what we try to do is we really try to kind of focus a bit more on what are the clubs going to do for you?
Yeah.
What's our fitting going to do for you? Because, Kevin, you're right. I prefer a blade. Wouldn't mind a slight cavity back to that. I just have a hard time picking.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, I could literally pick any one of them and I'd be happy with it.
Sure.
Because that's just the style that I like. And I would highlight, in terms of the newest, the Mizuno S3. As we talk about kind of that complete package, looks are phenomenal, feels phenomenal. Numbers and performance. If you were looking for some workability but still a little bit of forgiveness, you mentioned it. I've really been high. One of our podcasts last week, we were talking about this. The ZXI 7 is outrageously good. Yep. I think better than the last. Not to say the last wasn't great, because it was really good. Just it's got a little bit more mass. It's got a little bit better feel. And we talked about it because when we were doing testing, right? I'm like, the ZXI 7 is amazing.
Yeah, we did some testing too. That was really good.
But I look at it and go, hey, we don't have a new model from Ping, but Ping has the Blueprint S, and it is phenomenal.
Oh, God.
It's outrageous.
I can't believe I didn't mention that.
It's
like, I think I picked it as one of my top clubs.
Fitter's choice?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So good.
Yep.
And you would want the T probably.
And I wouldn't even mind a kind of maybe blending a little in, and we start.
Sure.
So now we get into this category too, and we start talking about
blended set
makeup.
Yeah.
We start talking about where do we move some things, because some players can come in, and I don't mind blades all the way through, because for me I need a little bit more launch and spin. It provides that. Mm-hmm. The other side of it becomes, that longest iron's not really getting in the air as much, not really going as far. So now I may need to change that into a different style. Mm-hmm. So I move from that player low pro, handicap style players, a workability. I don't need that in my 5 iron. I just need my 5 iron to go higher and straighter. Yeah. And so now we start talking about set makeup. And the same thing can be said even in the player's distance, where traditionally in that more max forgiveness, we tend to just stay more max forgive in that lineup.
It's almost, in a way, it's like, we were just talking about all the categories of irons.
Yeah.
And, maybe some people are watching this and going, I don't know what category I need. There's so many out there now.
Yeah.
But in a sense, with the ability to blend sets, you don't really even need to pick a category. You just have to, the
Yeah.
fitter will do that for you with the blending it where it needs to
Yeah.
be blended.
You need to find that point where you're most comfortable, and then when it starts to get wobbly, that's where you make your change.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you just put yourself into a golf club that's going to help you out a little bit more.
Question for you though, Kevin. Going back, because you've been at this game for a long time at a high level, we really didn't have a whole lot of progressive sets. It's known kind of as a progressive where you might start with the blade, get a little, go up into this, middle irons is a little cavity back, go up and maybe a little deeper. Personally, I've played Wilson staff for a long time. People who know me know that I played Wilson staff. And the FI5 way back in the day in kind of like the mid 2000s was very progressive. It was a blade into a very cavity back into another deeper cavity back. Podrig won a couple of British Opens and PGA with it. Titleist had one, and I think it was the Phil Mickelson version where they went from, maybe it have been like the 7:31 p.m. or something. They went from blades to cavity backs. A lot of the companies now are doing that, allowing us to blend the sets but for a longer period of time. We only kind of had, like, if you wanted this, all the irons were that. Now the companies are engineering sets that way. They're allowing you to do either or. Mix and match this. We're going to tailor suit this, the weight, the look, the length, things like that. But I think for a long time, we didn't have necessarily that choice in the business.
Yeah.
It was kind of just, oh, you want blades? Well, here's your blades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating how that's changed, and now it's again no better time to get fit for irons.
For sure.
I would also say is in this category for that too, a lot of the clubs in this category they're made that way. They're engineering. You don't have to do it because they're like the 4-iron is not just like the pitching wedge.
Yeah.
Or 5-iron or what have you. And so I think that's been one of the major kind of like selling points to a lot of these pieces of equipment is we can start to blend together something that might be a blade into a cavity back, into a deeper cavity back.
Yeah.
We can start getting max forgiveness in the long irons and player distance in the mid irons and more control, in the shorter irons.
We have a couple really good questions in the chat that I wanted to get to here. We have about 8 minutes here, so I want to be relatively quick with them. But quickly, one from Devin here. He mentioned, do you guys see that brand loyalty gets in the way of your fitting sometimes, where the customer really wants a certain brand, but it's ultimately in the performance and the data, it's not the best for them.
Yeah.
So it will get in the way on occasion. I try to be forward with people and say, look, the likelihood of one brand performing the best for you throughout every category is very, very small. Unless you're being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for it to be, right? Then, of course, it's going to be. But if somebody wants one particular brand, I am not going to stand in their way. I will fit them, and I'll find the best fit across that brand.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes my life easier. If I know I'm only working with one brand, I can go a little deeper dive into, maybe shafts or, whatever, because I've only got one to work with. I think we all have some jealousy when we go out and we go to Titleist or we go to Callaway or Ping and we know that they're only working with one brand, where we work with multiples, and we don't have, all day to fit, somebody. So, but the likelihood of one brand being the right thing all the way through, probably pretty small.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And to that, you might miss something, right?
Yeah. You
might miss the driver because you wanted X, this driver versus that driver or company versus company on things like that. I also think it's not the worst thing in the world because there's so many choices amongst it.
Sure.
Like people come in all the time and are like, I'm really this brand. Great. I've got 7 iron options for you. I got 5 driver options. Like where it narrows down maybe a slight bit is in fairways and hybrids. There's maybe just a few of those. That's kind of and also maybe in the wedges. If someone, the Vokey is the number one selling, Titleist Vokeys are the number one selling, number one played. Okay. If you're not a Titleist person, but you're a Vokey person, you probably are going to stick with your Vokeys.
Right.
Right. And so even in the professional bag, there are still, even they're paid millions of dollars, top to bottom, when they pull that head cover off, that driver might not be that company.
Yep.
Yeah, you see, if you pay attention on TV, you'll see exactly what Tyler's talking about.
Because even the best players in the world know that the club that gets the job done is what they need. And there are so many options to it. And so, but I agree with you. Someone comes in, says that, it's like, okay, great. Let's find a good fit.
Yep.
We got a question from Jeremy asking, do you prefer to have, we did this briefly yesterday, Kevin, so Tyler, I'll get your take on this one quickly. Do you prefer to have a gap wedge that's a set match or the specialist, like a Vokey wedge?
Awesome question. Go for it.
No, go ahead. We talked about it yesterday.
We got a clip coming up on social. We filmed yesterday. So this is your spotlight here for a minute.
I tend to look at it in terms of what we need. If in the irons we really need a little bit more of the forgiveness, the distance, if your swing is kind of just, hey, I'm just going to make my iron swing with that wedge, then the set wedge is usually probably the better because you're probably using it more for distance and forgiveness directionally. But I will say that generally speaking, high swing or high speed type, high ball speed, high spin, very aggressive moving, you're better off, generally speaking, with the actual wedge that would match with the loft. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, do I need control? Like, I've never played this until last year. I played a 48-degree wedge. That's a Vokey wedge. It was the best club in my bag. And I have never liked something in that 50-degree range, ever. But what I found was I had more spin, more control, and it went the exact same number I was kind of looking for a lot. That, to me, is where you really have to just have a conversation and say, hey, what do I need out of this? Do I need the forgiveness and kind of the distances with my irons? Am I just kind of moving this? Is it just a one shot, one swing type? Because, and I say this, you don't have a whole lot of grind options as the gap wedge is the set.
Right.
Yep.
And when we start talking about grind wedges, a grind on the wedges, those come into play for how you want to use it.
Yep.
So I look at how you use it and then the kind of speed you're generating and the kind of numbers I'm looking for with spin.
Yeah. We got 2 questions we'll take left here, and we got 3 minutes to do so.
Okay.
So, ZB, who was talking to us about his irons earlier, asked, his local fitter only offers a 7-iron fitting. How would he make the decision about a mixed bag?
Yeah.
So, basically, we talked about this a little bit, but what exactly, is it just about the comfortability level and trying on the course?
It really is about comfort. And, if we're going to potentially do a blended set, we work primarily off 7 irons also. We have a couple options, like with Cobra we got a 7 and a 5 or 9 and a 5 we could throw in there, but for the most part everything we do is with 7 irons. So we're going to hit both models and see how they feel, and if we can look at numbers, we can look at their experience visually and sound and feel and make a decision that way.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to, I am really comfortable hitting irons up to X, and then at that point you make the split.
Yeah, and what club are you going after, the flag versus just trying to hit the green?
Sure, absolutely.
So, all right, last question here that we're going to take, and if you have any other questions, you're watching this and you're just like, I didn't quite get one in, you can leave it in the comment section and we will absolutely get to it and respond to it that way. But he says, I like both Srixon ZXI and Mizuno JPX series. I don't take much of a divot. Which one would work best for that type of turf interaction? He's a 90-mile-per-hour 7-iron swinger. For a little bit of background information, or would you recommend a different brand or club selection other than those two? So I'll let Tyler. Yeah, Tyler, go for that one.
Yeah, good question. I would look at turf interaction as kind of being this, because you do have high swing speed, but you're kind of picking it off the turf. I'd say the smallest sole you can possibly get to. I do like the forged because the forged has the tri sole on it. It's got a pre-worn leading edge. Srixon's really nice because it has a positive and negative bounce. So there's leading bounce and trailing bounce on their V sole. That's also really nice. I would look at it also. The S3 by Mizuno might be a really, really super good fit. Did he mention spin at all?
He did not say spin. That'd be obviously part of the
That's
conversation.
kind of what I'm going with, is because like the forged would be really, really good. You're going to be able to pick it, and it's going to be okay for you. But it might not spin. So spin's going to be my thing. Launch and spin's going to be my thing.
Yeah, it's kind of, I like your point, though, about the sole size.
And to that, too, is don't don't overlook something like the Forged 2, the Srixon Forged 2 blade, because the blade does offer almost the same sort of forgiveness aspect, ball speed aspect. It's just maybe a little slimmer sole to that too. And
he said 5,500 to 6,000 spin.
So
he's got enough spin.
Yeah.
For really any of those clubs.
Yeah.
So.
Then I would look at is if you're going to have the testing side of it, I would look at the landing angle.
Of course.
Yeah, I would look at landing angle because you're going to want to be able to control that. So it's more, all right, if I'm launching it good, I'm spinning it good, how is it coming out of the air? And my talk is always this. The carry distance is the most important number in terms of distances we talk about. The environment will always determine your total. If it's wet, it's dry, it's uphill, it's downhill. So find your carry distance and consistency, and then see what kind of stopping power you have.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, this has been awesome. This is kind of fun. We makeshifted the studio setup here a little bit and made it happen. So we appreciate Kevin for flying in, and we got a bunch of content coming from him here soon on the channels. We appreciate Tyler, of course, always being available, sharing his wisdom. Golfers, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll be live at lunch on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Central. And again, stay tuned for more. We appreciate your support of the channel.
Keep your grooves clean and stay razor sharp.